This is Power Athlete Radio. With your hosts, Denny K, Professor Booty, and the Luke Summers. And now, toes forward, hips locked, shoulders set, and retract those scapulars. It's time for some knowledge bombs.
And thanks for tuning into Power Athlete Radio. This week we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Kirk Parsley. A native Texan, Dr. Parsley began his fascination of sleep studies after having spent 6 years as a Navy SEAL and another 5 years as the team's clinician. Hear why Dr. Parsley realized that despite his efforts instituting new diagnoses and treatment protocols, he felt his practices would be more embraced outside the current military bureaucracy. In this episode, we get to pick Doc's brain about the correlation between metabolic syndrome and sleep, whether or not sleep pods are bogus, and if you really can make up for those long-lost sleep years of shift work, raising kids, or late-night raging on Red Bull vodka. You will not want to miss Dr. Parsley's top 3 tips on how to positively alter existing sleep habits, and in no way do they include taking Ambien. Find out what disassociation is and why it is definitely not the same thing as natural sleep. If you're listening to this now, it means you're awake, and that's good enough reason to stay vertical and take in the knowledge bombs here on episode 95 of Power Athlete Radio.
Power Athlete Nation, what is up? Welcome to another episode of Power Athlete Radio. This is Denny. I'm here with John, Luke, Texan, Callie, and we have a special guest with us today, Dr. Kirk Parsley. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Outstanding.
John is silent.
Nope.
John is silent. So, I guess we'll just kind of, before we get the ball rolling, though, I mean, let's talk about just real quick about that Super Bowl.
Which one?
The Super Bowl. Right?
And the outstanding decisions.
Who won the match?
Who won the match? Right.
How many goal point units were scored?
I mean, it's a lot of controversy. People are released that article about it.
Mm-hmm. What's controversy?
Much complaining about that not calling beast mode, and
dude,
it's like, come on, really?
Well, first of all, let's put this to rest, dude. It was actually the right call. So you got to remember that it was second down. They had one timeout, so all of a sudden, if they go and they run it on second down, they're going to have to run it on third and fourth. So the idea was throw on second. If you throw an incomplete pass, then you come back. The clock's already stopped. You have third down to run the ball, and if you run the ball and you get stuffed, then you have a timeout to stop the clock so you can set up for fourth down. So it was actually not a bad call. Just the guy made an incredible play.
Yeah. It was a nice idea, just poorly executed.
Yeah, no, everybody's like, oh, you should have given it. Well, yeah, I mean, fuck. Like, the guy just had a 4-yard run for one where he got taken down to the one. What about that play? How come you couldn't get an extra yard? So I think everybody loves to be a Monday morning quarterback, but it was actually the right call to make.
And had it worked, it would have been the greatest call,
Well, I mean, that's the NFL. Like, if you win, you're the best. If you lose, obviously, you are, like, the worst. And if you're the Patriots and you win, you're obviously cheaters. So.
And I think a lot of misguided attention's going to Belichick and Brady because clearly Gronk is the true winner of this Super Bowl because I think he's been on, like, a 4-day rager.
Dude.
Based off of TMZ. Dude, like, dancing till his pants rip. Like, that's my guy.
Dude,
that's a standard Saturday, though, for me.
He was wearing a 69 jersey, and then he had, like, a Despicable Me hat on. And I don't know if you guys saw it, but somebody tossed him a beer, and he, like, put his thumb through, pounded it, and then somebody tossed him a bottle of Fireball, and he started pounding that, and he was just up there, like, blah, screaming. And the best is everybody's like, we love this guy. And I'm like, you know what? This is so cool. I'm so happy for that dude.
Yeah, that he gets, that character is acceptable for him.
Yeah, because
whereas if it was someone else,
yeah,
he's not very articulate, though. I've seen him when I got
but he can catch. That's all that matters.
He's a total rockhead. But here was the thing I said to Luke the other day.
He's no mathlete.
They're like without. So think about this: if Aaron Hernandez wasn't a sociopath and killed people, would Gronkowski have ever got the shot? Would he ever have the attention? I mean, would they even have drafted him?
Yeah, that's.
Or if they did draft him,
are you trying to spin a positive on this right now?
Yeah, I mean, like Gronkowski, I think might have been.
He probably would have been on the Bears.
Well, no, I think he framed Aaron Hernandez.
I thought they drafted him first, though, before Hernandez. They drafted him and his brother. Both Gronkowskis were on the Patriots.
Yeah, I think the other Gronk was he was a defensive lineman, I think. Right?
Doc, what's your take on all this?
You guys have surpassed my current football knowledge by orders of magnitude already. As soon as the Cowboys are out of it, I don't really follow football that much. So.
Got it. So where are you speaking to us from right now?
I'm speaking to you from an empty apartment in New Braunfels that I just took ownership of yesterday, or rentership of, whatever the appropriate word is for that.
Are you originally from Texas?
I am. I lived on Kima Island, which is on the Houston Ship Channel, until I was about 7, and then I moved out to Katy, Texas, and finished high school from there almost, and then joined the Navy. So, and California. I went to Taylor.
That's where I went. Fucking small world.
Shit. Yeah, that is.
Here we go.
What year did you graduate?
2004.
2004. Yeah, I'm a few years older than you. Yeah. Like 16 years older. But,
how funny is that?
Small world. Look at
that.
Hey, Doc, did you know Tony Fadulu?
No, doesn't sound familiar.
Okay, he's from Katy, Texas. He was the running back on my brother's team.
That's funny. That does not sound like a Texas name.
Well, his dad was a research scientist from Africa, and they moved to Texas for a research clinic. But Tony was, he was a running back, played on my brother's team. He's from Katy, Texas, and I think he went to Texas rival high school, if I remember right.
Oh, he went to Katy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something in the water out there. There's quite a few notable folks from Katy.
Like
for a small town.
And Doc Parsley.
Like Renee Zellweger and Nolan Ryan.
Who?
Janine
Zellweger. Come on.
Janine Garofalo?
Oh yeah. Her brother's great. Hey Doc, obviously. Us having you on the podcast wasn't by accident. Mainly, it's because you and I are friends.
Everybody else said no, right?
Yeah, well, no, we've been trying to get you on because it seems like the internet world and the podcast world has just been giving you a massive HJ, and I'm like, all of a sudden, everybody's like talking about this Parsley dude. I'm like, you mean, really? We've known each other.
That's a clown. I know that idiot.
I was like, that guy's a hack. Hack fact number 1. Yeah. So,
they I'm on Wikipedia now. It's under quack.
Well, you also have a TED Talk.
Do you really?
Oh, yeah, he's got a pretty good TED Talk on sleep.
Guaranteed to be watched.
Well,
tonight.
I actually met Doc through our other little wormy, nerdy friend, Rob Wolf. And then Doc and I have worked together on a couple retreats and a couple speaking engagements for Naval Special Warfare. And also, for those of you guys wondering, Doc Parsley is a former Navy SEAL and then went to med school through the Navy and became, one of the clinical docs for the teams for 16 years or something crazy.
No. I had 16 years total service. Oh. I was at the SEAL teams as a SEAL for 6 years, and I was back as their doc for a little over 5 years, and that was my last foray in the military. I bailed out of there, but by and large, because of because of the way I started practicing medicine there, it wasn't really compatible with a heavily bureaucratic organization like the military.
Would it be possible for you to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's basically, it would be no different, if you're working for
The NFL?
Yeah, or the NFL. Yeah. So if you're working for the medicine in the Navy, you work under something called BUMED, the Bureau of Medicine, which is like a Washington, D.C. kind of level thing. So it'd be no different than working for like an academic hospital. Like you're just completely hamstrung by standard of care, right? Like, so if it's not what WebMD says, then it's not the answer. And then you add to that all the Navy bureaucracy about fitness for duty. So what guys are, what sort of treatment can a guy be getting and still be, doing his job? So like obviously you couldn't have an insulin dependent SEAL, right? Because you can't, guarantee the guy's going to get insulin injections when he's out on a mission, whatever, right? So there's limitations, but that's a severe example. But there's also there's some much less intuitive limitations as to what you can do with guys because it doesn't fall within the standard of care. And so, the problem was really that, the SEALs were having problems that couldn't be handled. It couldn't be handled without giving them medications that would disqualify them from being SEALs. So I had to go and figure out another way to do it, which kind of led me down the alternative, complementary alternative, whatever the evolutionary medicine, ancestral health, whatever you want to call that whole sort of, non-pharmacological based treatment regimen is really how I got into it. When I got to the SEAL teams, I didn't know anything about sleep. They never taught me anything about sleep in medical school. If they did, I slept through it. Like I don't remember a single class on that. So, I got to the SEAL teams, and it wasn't even really sleep they were complaining of. That was like a sideline, but they came to me with essentially what sounded like metabolic syndrome and looked like metabolic syndrome, but they were like way too young and healthy and fit and active and eating too well to have metabolic syndrome, and it didn't make sense. And sleep was just one of the avenues that I started pursuing, and it turned out to be a really, really big player. And then, the more I learned about sleep, the more I learned about how that ties into hormonal production and appetite regulation and everything essentially. There's really nothing that isn't affected by sleep. And so I kind of started going down this path that looked more like a naturopath, something more like a naturopath would do, and trying to do things through lifestyle modification to help people improve all these metabolic markers, including their hormones. And hormones are a 4-letter word in the military, not because they can't spell, I guess. But it was a sketchy scene, and they didn't really like me not giving people Ambien for sleep and not giving people anti-inflammatories for their chronic pain and all this other stuff. So it was kind of considered quackery and just led to a ton of conflict. And I just said, hey, I can either stay in and practice shit I don't believe in for the rest of my life, or I can just go out and do my own thing. And I figured I'd be a lot more helpful to team guys outside of the military than inside, and that's proven to be true so far. So hopefully the run continues.
Do you think that some of those systemic issues that you dealt with, do you think that there's any hope for sort of seeing the light with that and keeping some of the health components of these SEALs with high regard to their commanding officers or their training?
I think you have to look at it from just a bigger global thing. I mean, the SEALs and what Doc Parsley's dealing with is really just a microcosm of a much bigger problem, where obviously you go into a doctor and you complain of something, and instead of being like, hey, let's talk about your food, let's talk about your training, let's talk about your sleep pattern, stress, you start talking about all these kind of holistic things that people would say are quackery. And what do they want to do? Oh, you have high cholesterol, let's give you this. Oh, you can't sleep, let's give you this.
Yeah, it's all treatment instead of
it's like
preventative.
It's basically putting a Band-Aid over the check engine light, and then all of a sudden you get these guys that have 8 different medications that they're taking all at once to combat all these other things that end up becoming just perpetually feeding on each other. And whereas what was so cool with what Doc was doing is he looked at these guys and almost was forced to figure out a way to work within the confines that he was given, and ended up he ended up kicking ass and being one of the experts and the guys that I would definitely choose as my Who Wants to Be a Millionaire lifeline. It's true though. I mean, like I wrote about it on our in our forums today. Whether it be training or health and nutrition, I mean, I think you got to have some people that are really good, and Doc is definitely one of those guys who, so far ahead of the game on some things, and it's pretty exciting. And he's also got a really cool sleep cocktail coming out, which I am super excited to try.
Yeah, we'll give you we'll hook you up with some of the raw powder here soon. I don't think the product will actually hit the market for a month, but we'll have some raw powder at my house in about a week, and when I come up to do the OGTT with you, I'll give you some of that, and you can just weigh it out for a bit until we get the stuff in the pretty little packets.
Hey Doc, I actually, on a personal note, I hit up Inclidon about that, and we did a deal on the glucose, and he's like, when we went back and did your stuff was always elevated in the morning, and as soon as you eat, it fell below 80, and you were low over the course of the day. So he ended up recommending me a sleep study, and was like asking me some questions. It was like, hey, when we get a sleep study to see if you have some sleep apnea or something going on. And so I mentioned it to Kate, and she's like, there's, if you're sleeping in a certain position, you'll wake up a bunch of times every night. I'm like, well, how can you tell me? She's like, I did. I'm like, oh. So I mentioned that to Rob and to Inky, and he's like, well, if your fasted blood glucose is high in the morning and it goes down, he goes, maybe that's the reason why everything else was pretty good. So I got a sleep study scheduled, so maybe I might have to end up with one of those Darth Vader masks on.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I mean, that was another thing that I had to sort of battle with the SEALs is, as soon as I started, finding guys that have some serious sleep issues, which was actually the vast majority of them, big surprise. Again, standard of care will, tell them not to drink caffeine past noon, and then order a sleep study. Essentially, is the next thing on the list. And again, these guys couldn't take a CPAP out into the field with them, and on a 3 or 4 day mission. It'd be a little extra crap to carry and not very practical. So, there's some alternatives to that if you end up with essential or obstructive sleep apnea. We can talk more about it. There's some better treatments, and
cool.
And we'll see. We'll chat about that.
I'm curious if you think that like these issues that you deal with in your field, whether they be in the military or outside the military, do you think that they stem from either political reasons, or there's big business involved, or if it's just ignorance in general? What do you find to be like the most either frustrating or sort of like rampant mythology in what you do?
Hold on, I lost you for a second.
Okay, sorry.
What do I find to be the most frustrating or rampant? That's the last I heard.
Yeah, just sort of like, do you feel like there's a lot of not misdiagnosis, but mistreatment because of either big business, or do you think it's politics, or do you think it's ignorance? What do you think to be like the biggest issue there, or is it just a combination, like a whole big old mess?
It is just a hot mess. Like I don't know that you could narrow it down to one thing being the predominant issue, unless you were talking about like one specific provider. I don't think anybody was smart enough to sit back and mastermind the wreck that medicine has turned into. I don't think that the pharmaceutical companies said, hey, we're going to totally control this and keep everybody dumb. And I don't think that people foresaw the information overload of the internet, and the push to publish that's out there, which leads to a lot of the misinformation, and it leads to a lot of the overwhelm that prevents physicians from even trying to read. When you have 33,000 peer-reviewed journal articles coming out like every month, There's no way you can keep up on that, so they just say hell with it. I'm gonna pick and choose a little bit, or they're going to get their information from the New York Times like their patients do or something. So that's one problem. The pharmaceutical company, obviously, they have a vested interest in people taking medications. A lot of research grants come from those guys, so universities have vested interest in doing research on pharmaceuticals. And I don't think that there's anything nefarious going on. But if you're a medical school professor and you've spent the last 20 years, researching mu opioid receptors and this new drug that attaches to that's what you're going to be teaching. That's what's in your mind. And I don't think that people are actually masterminding a plan to sell more pharmaceuticals, but that's honestly what they know. That's what they spend 20 hours of their day thinking about doing, and so that's what they're going to promulgate. And then you select the next group of academics who are going to teach the next group of doctors, and the cycle repeats. And then, in society in general, people just by and large are really, really resistant to the idea of, hey, you've got to completely change your lifestyle and not be like everybody else if you don't want to have the same health problems as everybody else.
Isn't the idea, Doc, kind of in conventional medicine right now that they realize that people aren't going to change, so then let's find a way to medicate it? It's kind of like you see the commercials for diabetes, and they're like, you know what, just because you have diabetes doesn't mean you can't have these desserts. All you need to do is just take 4 clicks of insulin and you're fine.
Exactly.
And like you're watching this, you're wait a minute, like diabetes is a disease of carbohydrate. And it's like just the same thing. It just trips me out. Like, whereas, how many people go get their average checkup and the doctor's like, well, you need to do this, this, and this, and they don't make a change until something is like life-threatening, like they're in there with a heart attack, and then they come out, and how many of those people don't change? It's easier for them just to kind of like medicate around people because they realize that the ability to really harness and like make a legitimate life change, like how many people are able to do it and then do it for a great deal of time? And when you hear about somebody, it's usually on like The Biggest Loser because there was $1 million at the end of the pot of the rainbow. So and is it really that conventional medicine is broken, but in the same right, is it like people's being detached and not taking responsibility for themselves?
It's an enabling process too.
Enabling.
I think I totally agree with you, and I think it's really, really pervasive. And sleep's a good metaphor for that, right? Or a good example of that. When I talk to people about getting more sleep, they just turn off immediately. Like, my TED Talk is a great example, right? Like, when you pull up TED Talks, they have in the sidebar examples of other videos that you might like, and I've literally calculated it out to where I have in a 17-minute TED Talk that I'm trying to tell people that I honestly believe this is the biggest One Health issue. What the single easiest behavioral modification that we could do as a society that would damn near wipe out the whole healthcare financial crunch. And I literally have like 0.06% of the traffic of how to fold a Chinese throwing star out of a piece of notebook paper that's also 17 minutes long. So people just don't want to hear about this. There's a cultural norm that you're supposed to only sleep this long, and if you sleep longer than that, you're lazy, and you should be up before the sun, and you should be cranking and doing X, Y, and Z, and pushing and going and going and going. So people, one, they're not sure they believe it. Two, you have other guys out there promulgating biohacking, whereas if you just wear these special glasses and sleep on this kind of mat, and you can do 3 hours of sleep and be genius. And
Doc, as soon as I hear the term biohacking, I throw up a little in my mouth.
Yeah.
It's
you
like,
biohack
and the only guys that I've ever seen, I love all these these fucking biohackers. How come not a single one of them is either strong, in good shape, or anything other than good at marketing? So this biohacking bullshit. But before we go down that rabbit hole, because you were on a fucking incredible track, would you give us a Doc Parsley proved like 3-step, like how long, when, what, like kind of the because I've heard this, but I think the people at home, like kind of like when we have people on like a Matt Lalonde where he goes through all the stuff, and at the end of the day, people are like, tell me what the fuck to eat. And like I think for you, like with a lot of this stuff, and we'll go down the rabbit hole in a second, like what's the Doc Parsley steps to like becoming superhuman with sleep is basically what
Yeah, so I mean, I say this a million times to every client I work with, and in every lecture I put this out over and over again. The number one factor is actually valuing sleep. Like if you really want to sleep and you really value it and you really believe that it's going to help you, you'll get better at it. So if we haven't reached that step yet, then get on Google Scholar, start digging in, start finding the evidence, go read tons of people's blogs about sleep, look at all the stuff in the media, convince yourself that you actually need to sleep more. That's the first step. The next step is to set up your life to where, if you actually value it, now you need to set up your life to where it's just as important as every other aspect of your life. And if you want to break it down into sort of like the pillars of health, it's if you're gonna change your diet, what do? You get rid of all of the shit in your house, and you only put good food in your house. For effort discounting, you're more likely to steam the broccoli in your refrigerator if there's not a pint of ice cream in the freezer when you come home from work, right? So same thing is true for sleep. Like set up your life to have a sleep conducive environment. And it's all of the normal stuff that people talk about: sleep hygiene, decreasing the light in your eyes, and so forth. A caveat I throw in there, and I didn't come up with this. I've heard it from multiple other people that I've studied under. Is you set an alarm clock to tell you that it's time to start getting ready for bed, right? And that alarm clock is just as important as the alarm clock that gets you up for work, and it's no bullshit when you get up in the morning. When your alarm clock goes off, you've set that probably to be about the last minute you can get out of bed. So you do the same thing with your alarm clock. When this goes off at night, everything goes off, man. The computers go off, the television goes off, the lights go down to dim. You start doing your sleep ritualization, and we can talk more about what that means after a while, further in the podcast if you guys want. And number 3 then would be then just to set up your bedroom ideally, and that would be the cool dark room. Like 68 degrees is actually the kind of ideal temperature to sleep at, and obviously complete blackness like caves. So like those 3 things are like the super low hanging fruit, and you can spin off for an hour on 15 different tangents on each one of those steps. But that's the 3 things. First, value it. Second, like set up a real ritual around it. And third, make sure you have an environment that's actually conducive for sleep.
Would you say that for like many people, like a good indicator if they're getting enough sleep is that they can wake up, without an alarm clock? Would you believe that?
Well, I think that depends on a lot of variables. Like if you're a shift worker, you're screwed. Obviously, to some degree, we can't completely mitigate against that, but it's probably unlikely you're ever going to get yourself to the point where you can wake up refreshed without an alarm clock. There's also going to be, just like with your nutrition and your fitness, there's going to be cycles in life where, things just aren't ideal. And you're not always going to get quite enough sleep. And then there's going to be times, just like your nutritional needs and your exercise capacity vary from sort of day to day, week to week, your sleep needs change, within a standard deviation as well. And it may just happen that you're like in stage 3 or 4 sleep when you actually need to be waking up. And it's just not going to happen, just because of the cycles of that night. Maybe you went to sleep a little later. Maybe you worked out a little later in the day. Your cortisol was a little higher. It took you longer to get into lower levels of sleep. Like, who knows? And in an ideal world, if you could be on a perfect schedule, getting up with the sun and going down with the sun, then yeah. But a big stressor is if you try to tell people to try to live their life without an alarm clock. It's it's kind of like telling people to weigh and measure their food. It just probably creates more anxiety than it's worth.
We train as a group at 6 a.m. and we've been doing that for like 4 or 5 months, and what's been or even longer than that. And I don't know about you guys, but I wake up every morning at like 5:15 without an alarm clock.
Yeah.
Half of the last 3 or 4
right
months.
before the alarm goes off.
Not every day for me.
I haven't set an alarm in 3 or 4 months, and I try to. And but the deal is, if I'm not in bed before 9 o'clock, like if I, like this morning, I went to bed a little late because the kids were up crying. But dude, yeah, I was a wreck. I mean, even that like 1 hour of sleep on the front end, it's almost as if the sleep on the front end, like when you first get into bed, that first, like 2 or 3 hours is more valuable. Because like I can think of the times where I've been in bed at 9 and woken up at 5 and felt fine, opposed from like going to bed at 10 or 11 and waking up at like 6 or 7. So would you say that like certain sleep within the cycle is almost more valuable? That sleep on the front end is more valuable than sleep on the back end?
Yeah, definitely for for the reasons that like for your goals, I know are largely based around physical performance and all that type of stuff. So you're really like the cherished moments for you are all the anabolic sleep cycle. The anabolic parts of the histogram, which is
God, I love when you talk dirty, Doc. Keep going.
the stages 3 and 4 of the sleep, I don't want to get too complex here, but if you tie it into the circadian rhythm, and you are actually probably not using the sun as your cue, but kind of using the sun as your cue to deal with your light intake in your houses and so forth. If your circadian rhythm is kind of set in a zone and you're waking up at the same time every day, and then you go to sleep a little later in your circadian rhythm than you ordinarily do, then it changes the sleep architecture. And the first half of the night is when you get most of the stages, stage 3 and 4 sleep. When you get like in the second half of the night of sleep, that's primarily the REM sleep. And more stage 2 sleep, which is where you're doing a lot more of the neurocognitive aspect of replenishing neurotransmitters and consolidating memories and forming durable paths in your brain and all that type of stuff. So definitely, if you push that back, and even if you get you get 1 hour less sleep, and maybe that's still pretty close to your optimal. Like say you need to sleep 7.5 hours. Sort of as a bare minimum, and you're ordinarily getting 8 hours, and you go down to 7 hours, like that could just get rid of maybe 20% of your anabolic sleep pattern, right? The stages 3 and 4, but you're probably getting all of the REM sleep. So,
is there something like like when I would go, we run into two things with people. One is everybody lives like everything day to day. So if they fuck up one day, all of a sudden there's this anxiety. And I remember years ago, when I first started, befriended Dr. Dave Pasquale, we started talking about, calories, and he started really like, hey, John, I want you to think about, your calories and sleep and all these things over the course of a week or longer timelines. So that way you don't get stuck in like the minutia of a single day where like, hey, if one day you overeat, we'll just undereat a little day and just kind of get some balance. And he goes, it takes a lot of pressure off. And for me, in terms of, whether it be, trying to gain weight, trying to, lean out, all these things, like looking at things over a bigger scale. So I took that same application, I used it to sleep, and I started talking about like things like a sleep bank where, like let's say, hey, if I want to get 8 hours and all of a sudden you go to bed an hour later, then all of a sudden you're minus an hour, and then at some point you have to try to make up for that hour. And
so is sleep cumulative throughout the course of a week?
Yeah, I just called it like a sleep bank. Like on a Saturday, if I'm like down 3 hours, and I got to get a 3-hour nap. And what was nice about that, and the reports I got back from a lot of people, was it actually helped kind of relieve this anxiety a little bit of like, oh my God, I went to bed late, I'm totally screwed for the day. And it's like, life gets in the way, so I didn't get as much today, so I'm gonna try to get to bed a little earlier tomorrow. And it seems to work. I just wonder from your perspective if it's effective. Yeah, if that's an effective deal.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly how I approach essentially all the lifestyle modifications. I mean the most assured path to failure is to try to do everything perfectly every single day, every single minute. If you're just creating these huge anxiety cycles around, whether you got it exactly 76 grams of protein today, and you measuring all your food, and calculating every workout on a power meter or heart rate variability training, and you go too far down the rabbit hole, and then it's too easy to feel defeated. It's too easy to feel like you've done something wrong. And I'm very much a macrobiologist, man. It's like there's tons of super smart guys out there geeking out on the smallest little molecular shift, DNA epigenetic shift on anything you can think about. And there's probably a lot of brilliance in there that's going to culminate to some kind of great idea later. But for right now, I just say, hey, I don't know the answer any more than anybody else. Like there's a ton of new information out there that's coming out literally every minute. There's something being published that could be life-altering in the way I practice medicine or the way you approach your health. But for now, let's just stick with the big overall pictures. And what you talk about, the sleep bank, in sleep medicine we call that sleep debt, which is just like a credit card debt. And we don't know how long you carry around that debt, but we know it has to be paid back. And so, the big question is, if I sleep deprived myself for, 10 years in college, and then clawing my way up to middle management, now I'm kind of in a comfortable zone. How much do I have to sleep to pay that sleep debt back? And we don't truly know the answer to that, but there's been some pretty fascinating studies about where they take guys and they put them in these completely they've done it in bunkers, they've done it in caves, they've done it in just buildings that they convert out and make these completely dark rooms and put people in complete darkness with nothing but a bed and a toilet, and they put them in there 14 hours a day, let them out for 10 hours a day, put them back in 14 hours a day, and the average person sleeps like 12 and a half hours for the first 3 to 4 weeks, and then slowly starts kind of titrating down. And then, somewhere between sort of weeks 5 and 6, they're sleeping 8 hours a day, eight and a half maybe. And it averages out for adults to be somewhere around 7.5 hours, which means that they're laying around in a completely dark, cool room for 6.5 hours a day and not falling asleep, which most people couldn't do that, which means that most of us are carrying a sleep debt to some degree.
That's amazing. So they can calculate, I guess you can infer through that experiment that you can calculate how long it would take you to make up the deficit.
Well, it's obviously unique for each individual. I just start laughing thinking about where do I sign up? Like if you're like, hey John, we're gonna lock you out in this bunker and you have to sleep for 14 hours a day.
Dude, if I could find a way for that to be fiscally and socially acceptable, I could have the most fascinating sleep center in the world, man, and just cycle people through this camp. If they did nothing else but came for 6 weeks and caught up on their sleep debt, you would revolutionize people's lives, man.
That might be the like to me, people be like, oh, so like, what's your dream vacation? And I'm like, Doc Parsley's sleep.
6 weeks of sleep, maybe.
Sleep fantasy.
So there is a very sad thing that I should mention. Sky Mall, the magazine, unfortunately, has gone under.
No.
Yeah, I know. But there's a point to the story, and that the last Sky Mall little issue, they had out the sleeping pods, right? And Doc, I would be your ideal patient, because I am one of those people who at 8:30 I get sleepy, and then I start to turn my lights down or off, and I make sure that there's something in my ears blocking from extraneous sounds and stuff, because I can't get into sleep mode unless I do that. And when I do, I feel amazing. I sleep great, sleep in the dark. And when I saw these pods, I thought, what an amazing $7,000 investment this would be. And honestly, like those little pods, I would test them. I know there's a few around here where you can.
I can't wait for you to have kids.
Oh my! Never.
I cannot.
You mean those
wait
sleep-sucking parasites?
Let me tell you, dude. Children are the sleep succubus.
Sleep
I hope that you have 4 kids.
Nope.
And that 8:30 at night, I'd start turning the lights down.
As soon as I have kids, I say, hey, every man for yourself.
Oh, you know what? Like,
that's it.
Oh, God.
And then take care of yourself.
I hope you have kids. I wish kids.
Dude, I have 3 kids, and my youngest is my 11-year-old daughter. She goes to bed at 8:30, and after that, it's like the boys know what time they're supposed to go to bed, and hopefully they do it. But Dad's going to bed anyway, so
routine.
It's like, sorry, man. It's like I've done my job up to here. You're 14, you're 16. Like you got it from here, buddy. Like
exactly.
You're gonna suffer in the morning. I'm getting you up whether you went to bed on time or not. But I, of course, emphasize to them how important that is. But, yeah, I mean, there's a great stat on that. There's studies that have been recreated multiple times. It's like the first 2 years after a kid is born, the parents will lose, on average, 6 months of sleep in those first 2 years. So that's 25% of your sleep.
That's good enough birth control for me.
Doc, when we had the twins, I think for the first 3 months, I didn't sleep longer than something like crazy. It was like 45-minute shifts is what we slept in, because the kids ate every 3 hours. So the kids eat every 3 hours. You have to wake them up, change them, feed them, and then you change them again, and you put them back down, and then you lay down and you get them to sleep for an hour.
Kids are so needy.
Oh, were you breastfeeding, John?
Yeah,
that's why those pecs are so big, dude. I thought that was all muscle.
It's not for just show.
My wife exclusively breastfed those kids for 6 months.
Yeah.
So what were you doing up?
This is called assistant coach.
Oh.
So because she fed them at the same time. So you have to have somebody that gets up, kind of like gets them all ready and gets them into place, and then you get the other one, and then they start feeding, and then you lay back down, and then they're like, when they're done, you kind of burp them, change them, put them back down, then you crash out. And
I mean, I never thought of that. But probably twins would be twice as bad. For what you're saying. I mean, I counsel a lot of married couples on this. You know, that's one of the big objections I get is like, well, you know, we got the kids, blah blah blah. This is, I'm like, all right, well, you know, you guys can both die together, little American dream, or you can take shifts and you can both survive this, right? And it's like, your life's going to really suck for 3 days, and then my life's going to really suck for 3 days, but, you know, we're going to maintain our health and sanity through this. But with twins, I think, you're kind of screwed. I never really thought of that. You're kind of up at
we had to hire these doula ladies to come in, and they came in 3 nights a week just so I could sleep, or like, because like, dude, at one point I was like hallucinating, and my wife was too. And the doula ladies, the first day they walked in,
no, you really do have twins. You're not hallucinating.
They were both these ladies walk in, and I see them, and this was crazy. I go meet them. They're easily 350 pounds. And like talking with them, their breath smelled it's like burnt like carbohydrates.
That's because they're
and I'm sitting there talking with them, and I was like looking at like, and I was like, so how? Oh yeah, you know, we do this. I'm like, do you do this every night? Oh yeah, you know, I get like 1 night off a week, and I'm like, so basically I'm paying you to take care of my kids so that I can really just erode the.
How's that make you feel? They're going to die early.
Yeah.
You're paying. That's assisted suicide. You're
Hey, and you know what? It was the only way we made it was those doula ladies coming, because I mean, like.
You want to make an omelet? You got to break some eggs.
Exactly.
I felt so bad for the one lady that I ended up hiring Chelsea, who works for us, to train her. And she's like, I really need to get back in shape. I was like, you know what? I'll pay for the training just to try to like offset my guilt about the fact that. But I mean, like just seeing those ladies and like talking to them and being like, I'm really struggling losing weight, and they like give me all that. I'm having all these health problems, and I'm like, this is a case study. So I always thought like if you were ever going to really go like check for like sleep deprived people, you try to find like wet nurses or doulas or somebody that take care of other people's kids, because dude. Like that would be the perfect person for it.
So go ahead, Doc.
If you just look at there have been studies, like really long-term, pretty robust studies with nurses that work night shift, and it's just a matter of fact. Like you're your risk of cancer is significantly higher. Your risk of all causes of morbidity, mortality are way higher. You're, I think, like 3 times as likely to have diabetes, 3 times as likely to be obese. It's no joke, and the WHO recognizes sleep as a carcinogen. I mean, it's like it's up there with methylethyl ketone and toluene. I mean, it's like this. We know this, doesn't cause cancer, but it's highly correlative with cancer. So it's not something to be taken lightly, but it's the first thing that goes out the window when people start getting crunched for time. First thing they give up sleep. The next thing you give up is their exercise. Then they give up their nutrition, and then their stress level is just off the chart, and they're not doing anything about that either. And
then their dignity.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly.
I didn't get very good sleep last night, and when I got out of the shower, I said today is a sweatpants kind of day. I was looking for my elastic bottom sweatpants.
Okay.
Couldn't find them. So
I dignity.
Slim fit.
You're like, yeah, I took a really long shower yesterday.
Yeah, that's his first step to Costanza. That's basically it. So, Doc, I am a little bit curious. So we know like the sleep conditions that you mentioned above earlier. About creating that environment and then the sleep rituals that we'll talk about. But like, what are some like extreme examples? I mean, people will go to extremes, but those pods, I mean, things like that. Have you seen people have like just absurd success in that type of environment, or is it really just one of those things where it's like it really doesn't matter if you have a Tempur-Pedic or whatever? You need to have like the low hanging fruit, which is the light, the sound, and So did you have any experience with like testing people who sleep in like, even weightless environments, like in those sort of water, salt water?
Yeah, so I have a lot of clients that have done the sensory deprivation chambers. They don't sleep in them, but that's a good the sympathetic tone regulation. I don't know if you guys talk much about that, but that's great for balancing parasympathetics, which helps with rest, which helps with recovery, which helps with sleep, and all sorts of things. I don't know anybody who sleeps in them. I do know there's pods like the Huffington Post and a lot of these really tech savvy millennial type companies like Google and so forth have those pods for their folks to take naps in during the day. I think there's not a smarter investment you could make as a corporation. Do you need to go that crazy with your bedroom? I don't think so. I mean, if you think about it, like, evolutionarily, just 100 years ago, the average American was spending 10.5 hours in bed a night. By and large, for most of our evolution, we slept kind of in 2 blocks in the night. We were awake for a couple of hours, and people were obviously sleeping on dirt floors and rocks and all kinds of crap, and surviving with better health than we have today. But there's obviously a lot more environmental toxins. It's a lot more of a health hostile world we're living in now, probably too. So I'm not a big advocate of any sort of one sleeping system as far as beds and so forth go. Basically, if you find it comfortable, and it's you're not waking up with aches and pains or flip flopping around every 2 minutes to get comfortable or to get cool. One of the problems that does happen with the Tempur-Pedics a lot is they maintain a lot of body heat. And one of the reasons that you move around in bed at night is to find a cool spot, because one of the normal things that happens in nocturnal sleep is your body temperature goes down. Daytime naps, your body temperature actually goes up. So if your body temperature starts climbing in the middle of the night, you're more likely to wake up or have restless sleep or lower quality of sleep. So that's one of the complaints I hear with Tempur-Pedic, but that's not true for everybody. I don't know if it's because of my SEAL training or because of sleep depriving myself for 10 years. I could sleep on a thorn bush and be fine, like no problems. Other people are like super super geeked out, like need the perfect environment to get like a good night's sleep. So again, it's an individualized thing, but I mean, in the long run, if I were going to continually pursue one area of my life that wasn't optimal, sleep. If sleep was my nemesis, I don't think there's, I would be riding a bicycle and selling my car to get a sleep pod if I had to, or like as far as I needed to go to get quality sleep is where I would put that at the top, just because it impacts everything so much and so rapidly.
These guys, they think I'm super eccentric for it, but you know what? When I start Benjamin buttoning and looking younger every day.
Yeah.
Grab these up.
I've had I had a sleep number bed, and then I got a Tempur-Pedic bed, and I love my Tempur-Pedic bed.
Yeah.
I have like an off-brand Tempur-Pedic. It's baller.
So what's nice though is Duck's right. Like if you sleep with like too many covers, you'll get warm. So like I'll like either like I know it sounds crazy, but I sleep actually on top of the covers for like probably 7 or 8 months out of the year, and then when it gets really cold at this time, I'll actually sleep underneath the blanket. And but yeah, like if there's too many blankets on there, I'm like, and I look over at my poor wife who's got like 5 blankets on and a scarf, and she's sleeping, and I'm
scarf?
Like, yeah, my wife sleeps with a scarf on. She's so cold.
Oh my god!
Whereas I'm like laying, and she's like laying there like in like flannel pajamas with like a scarf on underneath the blankets, and I'm laying on top of the bed, and she's like, "That is so weird." I'm like, "No, you're weird." I think that Tempur-Pedic is for me personally, like I love it. Like I think it's the best bed.
Yeah, I mean, I think a guy as heavy as you, probably. I would guess would do better on a bed like that. I think once you get to the internal spring mattresses, no matter how elaborately they make them, it's just going to create a ton of pressure points for a really heavy guy. Like when you my wife and I obviously sleep on the same mattress. We don't have one of those dual zone things, and I'm literally almost twice as much as her. So I have no idea how that experience for her could be anything like it is for me. It seems like.
But you don't care because you're sleeping, so.
Yeah, I'm crashed out, and she's trying to wake me up to stop snoring, and.
You're like, go fuck yourself.
Hey, Duck, what do you think about these sleeping apps that track your sleep? I mean, Luke thinks he's better than me in most areas, but he gets worse sleep than me, and he tracks his terrible sleep every day. So what's the validity of these things? I mean, I guess if you don't implement any changes based on it, then you're sort of up the creek without a paddle, as it were. So
yeah. I mean, I think it's it's probably analogous to the heart rate monitor training if you're an endurance athlete or something. Like it's a tool, and if it causes you to pay more attention to your sleep, then I'm all for it. I think the quagmire we're in with all these wearable devices is that by and large there's a lot of people collecting a lot of data that they don't really know how to take action on, and so what do you if it's causing you to be aware and it's giving you and you have some resources to help you figure out what that means and how to implement some changes to optimize that, then they're great. If you're just kind of tracking it and going, my sleep sucks, my sleep sucks, sleep sucks. Like,
or it gives you anxiety.
I ate 10,000 calories today.
Yep, still fat. Look in the mirror. Yep, still fat. Like,
what my primary use for them is, one, it does have the alarm clock for like get ready for bed built in based off you set your wake up time, and two, supposedly, and I don't know, some days it works, some days it doesn't. You provide a variance to your wake up time. Let's say it's 15.
Yeah, a wake up range. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's supposed to give you try to wake you in the most optimal phase of that.
Your sleep cycle.
That's what's that app?
It's just called Sleep. It's on
I think I have that one.
Yeah,
I started using it, and then I got anxiety not anxiety, but I started feeling shitty because I was like, God damn it, I only got 3.5 hours of REM sleep,
but
and then my brother was using it's like, I got 4 hours.
You got the data for it though.
Yeah, that part I don't much. I kind of pay attention to it, but I just don't believe that it's perfect. So I just use it for the alarms.
So when I say deep sleep, and like when a sleep doctor, which I want to distinguish, I'm not a sleep doctor. That's a specialization that does the polysomnographs, and they deal with obstructive sleep apnea and CPAP titration and all that type of stuff. I'm just a physician that values sleep a lot and coaches a lot around it. So it's a slightly different gig. But when I say deep sleep, I'm using it in the medical sense, which means if we track your brain waves, you're in deep sleep, you're in theta or delta brainwave state, which is stages 3 and 4 of sleep. What all these wearable devices and the iPhone apps are doing, it's an actigraphy thing. It's basically using an accelerometer to see if you're moving around, and it's calling any low activity level deep sleep. But you're not actually paralyzed in stages 3 and 4 of sleep. You are paralyzed in REM sleep. So it's essentially, REM sleep is deep sleep, and stages 3 and 4 you don't move around much, so that's being called deep sleep as well. So there are some that correlate pretty well to what you would expect a hypnogram or a sleep study to look like. If you add the heart rate variability component to that, that's a much better indicator of whether or not you're actually in stages 3 and 4 of sleep. And again, these things are, I think, very usefully growing towards diagnostic tools. I think we're still, a little bit away from the lay audience knowing what to do with that data and how to interpret that data.
Yeah, and that's kind of plus I have dogs that jump in and out of my bed. I got my girlfriend sleeping in the bed and she's flopping around like a dead fish. Yeah. So I just mostly it's the alarm function I've used the most. But.
So not to backtrack, but I did want to talk a little bit more about your experience treating the SEALs when you did that, and if I guess just curious if you have seen any I guess injuries that were repetitive, things that came to you and you were just like, this is definitely like a sea change that's occurring within like the SEAL community, like these injuries keep popping up. Is there anything that you could see in their training that kind of alarmed you in terms of like the strength and conditioning aspect?
The strength and conditioning aspect affecting their joint health or their sleep?
Not their sleep, because I think we sort of touched on that. I mean, obviously, this is like a can of worms. I mean, there is innumerable kind of overuse injuries and things like that. But if you could speak on that.
Yeah, John's experience is pretty parallel. I mean, it's an unrealistic idea to train as hard and as frequently with the type of intensity, pushing through injuries. Obviously, there's no season, so like you're kind of always in season. You're always trying to be peaked, and to try to do that for 20 years for a 20-year career is just a completely unrealistic idea. However, like we need guys to do that because it takes 10 years to be a really good SEAL and to be able to teach younger SEALs how to be SEAls, and it's not exclusive to the SEAL teams obviously, and not even exclusive to Spec War. It's corporate knowledge. You're getting smarter and better at the job, and there's not a SEAL out there that doesn't have multiple overuse injuries and multiple chronic joint problems. I'd say the initiation training of buds just by and large destroys people's shoulders and C-spines. I mean, to find a SEAL without pretty significant joint laxity or impingements in their shoulders and without significant C-spine and arthritis after being in the teams for 10 or 15 years is pretty rare. And then they've actually gotten smarter. You may have heard the story of I was involved with building the first sports medicine center out there on the West Coast. And we hired our first nutritionist, and we hired Josh Everett as our first strength and conditioning coach. We pulled in an Olympic training center exercise physiologist. We brought in some athletic trainers, physical therapists, and all this. And for the first time, and this was 2009, right, when we were building this thing. This SEALs have been around for nearly 50 years at that time. So like for a lot, you may have heard the story that it was like 3 SEALs that kind of invented the whole idea of a triathlon, and so though like that type of activity has been around for a long time. Just run, swim, run, swim. Do pull-ups, do tons of body weight activity. And for guys like me, even bigger guys like John, like doing push-ups in the hundreds and thousands per day is just not a good idea for your joints, and doing pull-ups at that level is just not a good idea for your joints.
Not a good idea is like an understatement. Yeah. It's absurd. Yeah. It's absurd.
Yeah.
For those of you guys listening, just this is the one thing that just like all the training stuff for buds. You can say what you want, but the mere fact that you have to run 3 miles each day per meal, so it's a mile and a half from where you eat to where they train. So you eat, you run a mile and a half, you train, then you run back and you eat, and so those guys are running something like 9 miles a day just for chow
minimum.
And I mean that's just to eat.
That's not training at all. And oftentimes you don't even have time to eat because you're running behind on schedule. So your whole class runs over there, and one guy runs in and signs your class in, and then you all just run back. And then you jump into the next evolution, and it's maybe a timed run. Who knows? So it's definitely not meant to be a program to produce big, strong athletes. It's a total beatdown to see who's going to quit, and then we'll train you later is the idea, I guess.
Do you struggle with that, from I guess your professional / moral, but yet your understanding of the necessity that it creates within that environment? Because it really is it's supposed to find the weak, and it's supposed to find how people work together or turn on each other. And so how do you struggle with that?
Yeah, so this is a discussion that we've had many times. And I could go on ad nauseum about the programs we've been trying to develop around this, and the mindset shifts we're trying to develop around this. And I think there needs to be a delineation between your training to become a SEAL and, hey, now you're a SEAL. Let's be smarter about things. And we're getting there. We're starting to shift some of the younger guys, but. By and large, most guys come out of SEAL training and they think, well, this is what they did to me to create the SEAL in me to make me a SEAL. So this is what I need to keep doing to be a SEAL. But it's a completely different process, right? I mean, as you say, we're using this to select people who are really good at suffering and that are really resilient. And that's really all we're selecting out for. You don't have to be a phenomenal athlete to get through buds. You have to be a reasonably good athlete. You have to be a reasonably good endurance athlete, and you have to have a reasonable amount of strength. But you don't have to be anywhere near world class on anything to make it through training. You just have to be really resilient. You have to be able to suffer really well and pretend like you're not suffering, and work through pain and work through disappointment and work through stress and all that. And that's all we're selecting for. But once you're a SEAL, that's not what we want out of you anymore, right? We want somebody who's smart, somebody who's thinking, somebody who's solving problems, somebody who's training specifically for the type of work they do. When I was a SEAL, we did tons of combat swimmer training. Probably 18 weeks out of the year, we're doing these, we're doing 3-hour dives a day in 35-degree water, and we needed to do that because that was what SEALs were known for at the time, and that was what really distinguished us from everybody else. There's not a whole lot of combat swimming going on in Afghanistan and Iraq and all that stuff. So these guys need a totally different kind of training. And I think we're getting there. We're starting to see a shift. Josh has done a great job in going in there and focusing on mobility, which nobody even thought about before. I can't tell you how many SEALs literally can't touch their toes, at 25 years old, and you're just like, what, how in the hell can do you get by in life? Like, who ties your shoes for you?
Hey Doc, you didn't do SDV, did you?
No. God,
I'm surprised, as big as you are, that they didn't push you right out to that.
I lucked out, man. A lot of my class ended up going to SDV, and a lot of my class ended up going to SEAL Team 8 because they just formed SEAL Team 8, so they kind of stocked it with my class. And I think out of my entire class, only like 3 guys stayed on the West Coast, and I was one of those 3 somehow. So I think it's just kind of a random thing, but I was very glad to not be at SDV because at that time it was in San Diego. Now that it's in Hawaii, it wouldn't be nearly as bad, but
So for those of you guys listening, there's a section of Naval Special Warfare called SDV, which is SEAL Delivery Vehicles. And then you guys have ever seen in the movie, like, what was the... Well, one of those movies you'll see. They're basically
I've seen the commercials where they have those little rovers that come up onto the.
Well, no, they're actually like a mini sub, and they're launched out of submarines. So there's a whatever the movie.
Sub within a sub.
Yeah, it's like a little mini sub that these guys drive, and they
but they're not dry. That's the important thing.
No, you're in like full like wetsuit deal, and it's like an open water deal.
Oh.
So it's like a little car, and these guys will do 12, 13 hours underwater.
It's ridiculous.
And so these guys are basically driving in pitch black, and all you're doing is looking at like a little sonar, and the guy in the back is laminated magazines reading. I mean, I
think it's pretty badass. It's definitely badass. You do wonder, though, I have to be sort of devil's advocate and speak for the masses. Like, you do sort of wonder how practical some of that is, and then how many like dudes are just sitting around because they are so excited about like doing stuff like that they sort of create the necessity. I mean, I don't mean to discredit anything, but there is a part of me that's like.
So the SDV guys, those guys are operate more than any other SEAL team. So they're always constantly operating. So what their deal is that they can be anywhere in the world 24 hours.
It's cool.
And
I believe it, and I would never know about it, obviously.
So they so I've been over there and worked with those guys, and they are tip of the spear stuff, and definitely. But I mean, it's the craziest job. When they wheeled the little mini sub out and they explained to me what they did, I was like, got this like sick feeling in my stomach, and I was like, so you guys are underwater for like 13, 14 hours at a time? They're like, yeah, we do these and this.
It's a bit above average.
It's crazy.
Basically in a bobsled, like you're in a bobsled for 13 hours,
with a propeller on the back, in the dark, driving, looking at a little sonar radar screen, hoping to guide you to crash into something.
That's scary.
Yeah. And even the combat swimmer ops, when we were doing a lot of that training, you just have this little plastic board that has a watch on it and a compass and a depth gauge. And you have this whole thing memorized in your head, like these 8 different legs that you're going to swim on this azimuth at this depth for this long, and then you're going to turn. And it's not like you come up and look where you're at. You're navigating through these harbors underwater, just staring at this little board, and that's the cool job. The shitty job is the buddy who's just like holding on, to your your lanyard together, and he's just like kind of holding on to the lanyard. Hoping you're going to the right place,
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, well, hopefully this guy knows what he's doing, and we're going to be out here a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My goodness.
So, Doc, in your studies and your experience with a variety of patients or the team guys or whatever, I guess to relate over to our side of it, who are the cases of the N=1? Like, for example, John talks about playing with guys who eat chicken nuggets and crush Dr. Pepper, and like their diet's nothing but juice, chicken nuggets, and salt, but they're shredded and they're the most athletic guys, and you'd swear they're in the weight room 24 hours a day, dialed in. Does that case exist for the sleep side of it? Like, are there guys who are like, I really don't have to sleep for 3 days, and truly, I guess biologically, when you take a look at them,
the outliers.
The outliers, I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, to answer the Chicken McNugget guys, we just kill those guys. We drown them because we fucking hate them. Those guys exist in the teams too, and
one of them's Parsley.
No, I'm not. I am not.
That is fucking bullshit, dude.
I am not.
Parsley doesn't lift weights, and he'll go in for 3 days in a row and bench like 500 pounds.
Yeah.
No.
Were you also like a high school state like sprint champion or something? Rob Wolf was spinning folklore of Kirk Parsley and.
Well, I think for 2 track seasons, I was the fastest white boy in the state of Texas. But that was in one distance. It was what we called the 220 then, obviously, because we did it in yards. But the 200 meters, I was pretty good at that. I was pretty good at shot put. But my main gig was football. I think it'd be a stretch to say I've ever really been shredded. Even when I was at 6% body fat, I wasn't shredded. I'm just not kind of built that way. But to answer the sleep question, I think there are definitely outliers in the sleep. I don't think they're any more prevalent in the SEAL teams than they are anywhere else. This is an article that always gets thrown at me, especially in the corporate world when I work with these C-level guys or these uber wealthy dudes who've built all these companies. Like, well, there's this study that certain people only need 5 hours of sleep per night, blah blah blah. And I have to tell them, no, you're reading the New York Times version of that. If you actually go back and look at the study, it doesn't say that these guys perform optimally after 5 hours of sleep. They just suffer a little less. They still do worse than if they slept adequately. And so everybody breaks down, but it's like anything else. Like, how quickly do you break down? And that has it's multivariate analysis at that point, right? It's like, your diet's into it at that point, how you handle stress is into it at that point, how much muscle mass you're carrying around for your body to scavenge is, in it at that point, everything, your joint structures or, being able to maintain joint stability and not have joint pain when you're chronically inflamed. There's all sorts of variation to that, but I don't know of a single SEAL who has managed to, say, spend 20 years in the SEAL teams and not have significant sleep problems and significant sequelae from chronic chaotic sleep. When I got to the SEAL teams, they were treating everybody's sleep with Ambien, and it was just, it was purported by the medical community as this completely benign drug that helps you, that just creates sleep and you'll be fine, and it's non-addictive. And so SEALs, much like professional athletes, if 1 is good, 2 is better, and 4 must be awesome. So,
but before you go on, what's the best part about Ambien is if you take it and then you fight the sleep off. So, like, Ambien hits you and put you to sleep pretty fast. But if you fight the sleep off, like,
is this what your friend told you?
Yeah, my friend. You'll actually hallucinate. And I had a guy next door to me in training camp. Who wants to be
sleepy and hallucinating?
Right. So one of the guys who was next door to me in the dorms when I played for the Chiefs, that was his trick. He'd get the Ambience and he'd fight them off. And he came in my room and he's like, "There's a troll in my room. Can you come look for him?" So I actually went and looked for it. But he's crazy.
So that's actually what Ambien does, is it dissociates you from your environment. So it doesn't actually, it actually has a very, very minimal effect on how much total sleep you get, and it does distort sleep architecture, so the quality of sleep you're getting is nothing like just getting normal, natural sleep. So like I had a client who, she was a nurse. Well, I tell you what, she wasn't a client. She's a friend of mine who's a nurse, and she was telling me that her doctor gave her Ambien for her sleep problem because she knew what I did, and we were talking a little bit about it. She wanted to tell me a story. She was divorced, and her kids were with her husband, and she took this Ambien, went to sleep, and then woke up in the morning. She's this petite, cute little woman, and she walks downstairs, and her house has just been completely ransacked, and there's crap all over the place. And she's like, holy shit, and runs back upstairs and locks herself in the bedroom and calls 911, and there's an intruder in my house, blah, blah, blah. And then they send the police over, and she comes down, and they search the house, and there's like ramen noodle wrappers and cupcake wrappers all over the place and all this shit. And it was her. Like, she had gotten up in the middle of the night and was went downstairs and was cooking and eating all of her kids' junk food, and had no memory of it whatsoever.
I have heard podcasts about this very phenomena occurring, and people have sued companies because they have assaulted their spouses or killed them.
Yeah, they
saw a troll in his room.
Yeah,
they came and got me. And the worst is, I went to look for it because I believed him.
Yeah, so I mean, what is completely feasible is that you can take Ambien, and one of the problems with my job, and not that sleep's the only thing I do, but the biggest aspect of my biggest problem with getting people to sleep is you don't have an objective experience of sleep, right? Like, you just say, I don't remember, so I must have been sleeping really well. I don't recall anything about being asleep, so it must have been good quality sleep. And what Ambien does is dissociate your neocortex from your lizard brain, so you don't remember that. Your frontal cortex isn't there. You aren't forming memories. So what's completely feasible is you could take an Ambien, lay down in your bed, maybe doze off, maybe look like you're asleep, or maybe not even. I mean, if somebody filmed you, you might look like you're awake the whole time. At some point, you become dissociated, which is one of the defining factors of being asleep, is no longer being aware of your environment. And you could literally get out of bed, go downstairs, eat a bunch of food, play video games, go back to bed, sleep for 2 hours, wake up and go, oh, I must have slept all night.
That's
right?
crazy.
They don't have any memory.
Party!
That sounds insane. Well, I wanted to get your perspective on where you think, I know that you're not can we call it a sleepologist, sleeptometrist, sleepyology, but I wanted to get your perspective on where you think medicine is headed. If you're pleased, or you think we're all doomed to be on like 40 medications
Cue
a day.
the ominous music.
I know, right?
I think we're headed to the dumpster. I think that there is an awakening amongst a certain cohort of the population, and it's by and large the people that you guys deal with. It's become. I mean, I see sleep in the media a lot, so I see that coming around. I see a lot more talk about nutrition, a lot more robust analysis of diets that are going out there. You have organizations like Gary Tubbs and Peter Attia's NUSI, which is doing some alternative research on nutrition that's not mainstream kind of gigs. So there's a cohort moving in the right direction. They're obviously nowhere near as established, and they don't have nearly the funding as everybody else. But I think with the information age, the access of information on the internet, and everybody doing great podcasts and stuff like this, and having premium gated content on people's websites, I think there's a possibility of a subset of the population doing really, really well. But I want to distinguish that from the healthcare system. So, I think all of this hubbub about the Affordable Health Care Act and all those types of things, I don't really consider Western medicine to be healthcare. It's disease care, right? And disease care is always going to fail. And one of the things that I bring up when all these biohackers want to tell me about all this crap, that how they're tricking the body into this performance, I bring up to them, it's like, look, the original biohackers was the medical community, right? I mean, that was the whole idea that the baby boomers had, was no matter what I do to myself, they're going to come up with this magic pill, and it's going to biohack it, right? Like, I'm going to get rid of all of the deleterious effects of my poor lifestyle choices are going to be mitigated by this pill, or this next treatment, or this next procedure. And biohacking is the same thing, right? Like, they're trying to do it with gadgets and devices and stuff, but you're still trying to say, hey, we're smarter than 85 billion years of the Earth's evolution. Like we've got it all figured out. I think that aspect is doomed to fail, and I hope it fails really soon because I think it will increase the health aware. And so,
of standardized medicine or the biohacking? Because
I hope the biohacking kind of fades quickly. I think the standard.
Until somebody shows me something with like performance or like actually doing something with this biohacking bullshit, because drinking butter in your coffee is not fucking biohacking.
No.
Like fucking fasting is not biohacking. It's called starvation. Supermodels do it in Cali.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
so like
I've even read biohack by sleeping 9 hours a night. Like, dude, that's the
biohacking I want to get in on.
I'm like, dude, that is fucking lifestyle. That's normal evolutionary.
You should build a sleep center where we bring people in, and we should call it like biohack bunker or a bunker. Like a biohack bunker. We're going to biohack you by making you sleep 14 hours a day for 6 weeks.
And then you, like, when they're not sleeping, you just hug them and you say, it's not your fault. It's not your fault.
It's not your fault.
We go to like Big Fat Bob from we go get Meatloaf, and you get to cry on his big sweaty boobs.
Okay.
Cry now, Cornelius. That's all he says.
Yeah. That's so good.
Oh, it's so good.
So the metaphor I always give people is your auto insurance, right? So if we start treating healthcare insurance like we do auto insurance or homeowners insurance, then it has a chance of succeeding. Like the Western world is good at some stuff, right? If you do end up with cancer, you don't want to go see an acupuncturist as your first choice, right? Like you want to go in and see like what mainstream things are there. If you get in a car wreck, it's like, yeah, don't take me to a chiropractor if my femur's sticking out of my skin, right? It's like I want to go to a trauma center. So there's some things that need to be there. There are some things there's true genetic diseases. There's things that need to be treated, but that's the same as crashing your car, right? That's when your auto insurance kicks in. It's when you smash your car into something or somebody smashes into you. Your auto insurance doesn't pay for routine maintenance. It doesn't pay for you to change your oil and to keep your tires properly inflated and rotate them and keep your car clean and all that stuff. That's a self-responsibility, and that's what we need to get everybody hooked onto is like, look, you're responsible for yourself, and this lifestyle modification is the only way it's going to work. If you imagine, obviously we all do have to have auto insurance, right? And so just like now we all have to have healthcare insurance. And what if the government told the auto industry that they now have to start paying for cleaning and detailing their cars and oil changes and routine maintenance and fixing any kind of damage, dings, this and that, and everybody had to have it? Then how expensive would auto insurance be, and how overwhelmed would all the services around it be? And it's kind of the same gig. So if we start using healthcare for what it's designed to do, is actually disease care that we can't fix with lifestyle, it's too far down the track.
Yeah, I think
we take 75% of the people out of the system.
I was going to say, I remember seeing a statistic. I remember Inclin and I talked about this. He's like, 85% of the illness and the problems we see in this country are directly related to lifestyle, whether it be poor sleep, poor food, lack of exercise. How many people come in with joint injuries and these other just major problems, really because they never did anything to strengthen anything around it. It's like, I just remember somebody, and I think having a conversation. Actually, I was going to Denmark for a seminar, and I sat next to this guy who was Danish, and he made a pretty fascinating comment when he goes, how can you have standardized healthcare in America where nobody has any social responsibility to actually take care of their health? He's like, in Denmark and these Northern European countries, like, if you're in standardized, you have a social responsibility to be in good shape, to exercise, and to not weigh down and bog down the economy, and more importantly, the government and all this other stuff. He's like, in America, you have no social responsibility. And he's like, I go to America, and I'm just amazed at how many overweight, out of shape, and people are. And sure enough, we're in Denmark, I'm in Sweden, and we've been to Norway.
Selfish,
and like
sons of
everybody's tall, good shape, exercise, rides bikes, does this, walks up 5 flights of stairs because there's no elevator, and it's just such a different mentality.
Not only do Americans not take responsibility for it, but it's actually kind of celebrated, right? It's like like the uber successful people, that claim to sleep 4 hours a night and get up at 3 a.m. and read the New York Times while they're doing the elliptical and answering emails and get into the 5 a.m. office and start cranking and push themselves and live off of coffee and whatever protein bars and cocaine and whatever. It makes a good case that that we're kind of celebrating the poor lifestyle, and it's like we're holding this up as the ideal. And like John says, if like some really simple interventions, like I can't prove this statistically, like it would have to be a social effort for trial and error. But I literally think if we got rid of processed foods and everybody ate whole foods, you got rid of all the white powders that we're making foods out of, and got everybody to sleep every night. Like, bam, like I think 80% of chronic disease is gone, right?
Well,
like,
and I was thinking a little bit when we were talking about outliers earlier, like here's a classic example, like my dad has slept no more than 5 hours, and he's 77 years old, so he's slept no more than 5 hours his entire life. He usually goes to bed pretty early, right around like 9 o'clock, and he wakes up at like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and he usually get up and work. And I remember as a little kid, like laying in bed and hearing the typewriter going at like 3 o'clock in the morning as my dad up working. And his whole life he's been like that. He also has never really worried about what he ate, and he has never really exercised. And he was 77 years old before anything happened, and has never taken a medication, never had a surgery, never had anything go wrong. And at 77, ended up having a deal where he went to the doctor. They took his blood, found out he was low in testosterone, gave him a testosterone supplement. He starts rubbing this cream, not realizing that because of his blood sugar was high and he had some other couple things, that testosterone aromatized into estrogen, thickened his blood, clotted, and he had a TIA. And they thought he had a stroke. And then they scanned him, everything was fine. Go back, he has a second episode. At that point, we got all this blood work done, and basically his body it was all converting. And there's a situation where my dad had never been on any medication, never had anything wrong. He goes to some fucking jackass doctor that doesn't understand it, and almost kills the poor guy. And now he just made some lifestyle modifications and is fine. Is actually sleeping a little bit more for the first time in 70-some years. But I mean, and when I asked him a little bit about it, and his comment is he thinks that the time that he was raised and how he grew up, he's like, we didn't go to the store, everything was grown. Like, he grew up on a farm and moved out to California when he was a little kid. In the 40s, he's like, it was just such a different time. There was no grocery store, there was no fast food, there was nothing. He's like, my mom made everything, they made the lunch, everything was like, local. And this, he goes, you guys go to the farmer's market. We just called that, like, when we grew up, that was a Saturday. And he's like, he goes, I think it's just that people, Jesse was talking about this on our forums, he was talking about it. I think it's just a more robust person. And now what we're seeing is a couple generations that, I'm the product of my grandparents who weren't from this country. And now all of a sudden we're seeing 2 and 3 generations. And I just don't think that we're as robust a people as we were, or maybe all these other things are just kind of like trickling down generation. Like all of a sudden your parents didn't sleep, and now I'm the product of that, poor decision.
Yeah, I mean, there's great evidence to support all that, your father, probably is one of those outliers with sleep. I mean, we know that it's about 1 to 2% of the population that's actually in there, but everyone will argue that they're one of those people. But unless they have a life story like your father's, I tend not to believe it. But I think, it's just like if you think about sports, if you think about athleticism, muscle mass, even academic cognitive skills, I think the foundation for all that stuff is built in your childhood years, and I think you're more able to you're just more anti-fragile the better your foundation is, and the social lifestyle has changed. I guarantee you, people weren't as stressed, weren't working as many hours. We're spending more downtime. When your dad was young, there weren't all these plastics and pesticides and all these neoestrogens that were affecting hormones, and We know there's a direct correlation. We found in the teams with total testosterone and time in bed, and it's almost a 1-to-1. It doesn't matter if you're sleep deprived, your testosterone goes down, or if your testosterone goes down, you sleep less. Like it's almost a 1-to-1 correlation. It's like a 0.78 or something. And we know that my grandfather at my age, on average, my grandfather at my age would have had a 50% higher testosterone than I do. And that's primarily lifestyle and environmental toxins that are getting there and affecting sex hormone binding globulin. I mean, men didn't have sex hormone binding globulins at 80, in the 1940s and 50s. Like, they had sex hormone binding globulins of 5 to 10, maybe 15. Like, that was just normal. That's the way it worked.
Really? So like seven's pretty low then?
Yeah, yours is low, dude. Seven's pretty damn low. But the sperm count's even more ridiculous. Like the average male sperm count, I think I want to say it's at least 50%. It might even be more than 50% reduced in the last 50 years. Like the average male sperm count is only like 10 million away from being infertile, which men become infertile around 120 million per deciliter, and that's like the average. I think the average 28-year-old man is like around 135 or something right now. So
the other one that like total volume in terms of sperm, but actually I think it was activity of the sleepers or of the swimmers.
Of the swimmers, yeah, for sure.
So there was two things. It was that there was half the amount of sperm, but also the speed at which they swim and the ability to like swim over duration. So like now if they swim half as fast for half as long.
Right.
Whereas, like, the other ones, I think I was reading something like they had a deal where like sperm could swim and survive for up to 3 days. Now they're killed inside of 24 hours. So I mean, there's some like people don't want to necessarily, but I mean, if you take a look, like, dude, they've I don't know if you've looked at it, but they have this huge social problem going on in Japan right now with these, they have a term for them, but they're basically asexuals, where they're men and women that don't want to get married, don't want to have to do anything, and actually don't have any form of relationship. And, and they went back and they looked at, like, T-count sperm, and, like, it's basically, like, null and void that they've sterilized these people, and there's this huge, like, pressure, like how are they going to keep the generations going? And I always wonder if it goes back to whether it be like environmental toxins. I mean, a million different factors. Pretty scary.
Well, I just saw a recent study. I didn't read the article. I read the abstract of it, and I can't remember. I think it's in the Endocrine Society's journal. But they were talking about some pretty long-term studies. I want to say it's about 30-year trial on this thing. When they were testing the pregnant mother's cord blood for the BPA's from the plastic, and they found a really, really strong correlation between HPTA dysregulation in those women's offsprings in their cord blood, the BPA's in their cord blood. So the environmental toxins are shifting everybody's hormones around. It's not just men; it's men and women. And it's not just testosterone. I mean, it's working as a xenoestrogen or neoestrogen, but that's also affecting DHEA. That's affecting cortisol. It's affecting thyroid production. It's affecting probably insulin and glucagon at some levels. If you trace everything back far enough, like every hormone kind of depends on the other, and it's a mess that we're in, and to try to solve it with fancier new pills and fancier biohacking and fancier devices, I think is just a recipe for disaster. I mean, the simple, cost-effective solution is just educating the masses and getting really successful people to stand up and admit that they should sleep 9 hours or 8 hours a night, and that to have a lot of healthy choices available wherever you go eat, and where people eat, have our kids have healthy food at school, parents regulating how many hours their kids can sit in front of Xbox. It's just going to take a grassroots social movement to save us. It's definitely not something that can be done by a medical society or by the government or anything like that.
Yeah, I think one of the
I'm in.
most like poignant things that you said that really encapsulates this whole issue is, I mean, the fact that 54,000 people, 54,200 and some, have viewed your TED Talk versus, the number that have viewed how to make an origami Chinese throwing star.
Or even Gangnam Style.
Yeah.
It is.
Have you heard that song though?
Just on the
Pump Up Music.
No, what's the pistachio commercial?
Oh.
So I haven't heard it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
It is so indicative of sort of like our attitude towards it. And you know what I say to those people who haven't watched it, or don't plan on watching it, or don't plan on being a part of the conversation? Fuck them.
Well, don't you think that's kind of a good thing? Because I always think like at some point
we're going to inherit the earth. That's what I'm trying to say.
Doc and Rob and I, we always rap about this, that like we got to find the place to like set up our own little compound and like live out there and be like, right, we'll just be out here and be awesome. You guys can just...
When all these assholes destroy themselves.
Yeah,
Just sleep right through the apocalypse.
Dude, you know what? We're going to get a bunker. It's going to be called Sleep Bunker.
We have a bunker. It's called this office.
Dude, John, we found eight acres today of riverfront out here in New Braunfels for like $2.
Dude, send me the address because we were out. You already know this, but yeah, we were out in Austin, kind of checking out the areas, and we've been kind of scoping it. We have this dream of creating a Power Athlete Ranch somewhere in Texas that would be close, and then we can just suck Robbie into it, and then we can. At that point, we can actually set it up where we have a 1,000-yard range, and we can just
live
go out
as
and
exactly
like a weird power athlete commune type environment.
I love it.
Yeah.
It'll be like the hippie communes. It'll be like the hippie communes, but for a higher purpose than just kind of hanging out together. Yeah.
We'll actually be like hippie communes, but
be
just
more
for
like
good athletes.
be more like Galt's Gulch or whatever from.
Yeah, we'll be the most jacked hippies. You'll be the most shredded one because
I always imagine
6% body fat.
Like a big barn full of weights, and then like a big fire pit with like tables around, and then you would have to meet at like the morning training place, and then like come out. Oh, that would be cool.
Well, I would love to elaborate on this, but I have to actually get started on that project right immediately. So we can't thank you enough for joining us on the podcast. This is going to be so great when all of our listeners get it. This is a super long one, which is awesome because I mean, I think you guys would agree. I mean, everything we talked about was super pertinent to everything that our listeners are into and stand behind. Yeah. Well, if you take out all of our parents, then it's really just like 4 people.
Oh, yeah, we count our parents.
Yeah. We have to.
But thanks again, Doc, for taking the time out to do this.
It's our parents at Herbal. That's basically John, here's shout out Herbal.
Yeah. It's my pleasure being on the podcast. You guys are doing great work. I'm always inspired by people who are actually out there creating content. I've had that plan for years, and I just don't get a whole lot of time to do it. So,
well, you're changing lives, and that's a much more noble feat than what we do.
That or just sleeping and being lazy.
Yeah, he's fucking sleeping all day. No
wonder.
If I just slept less, I could probably get more content out about it.
Lazy ass.
Yeah. 5 hours is plenty. That's what I
heard.
heard.
Thanks, Doc. Appreciate it, brother.
Hey, talk to you all soon.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Join us next week when we talk with Dan John about a myriad of topics, including why he views coaching as an art form, his preference of the long jump over the vertical jump for testing, and the rationale for telling an athlete, quote, maybe God just doesn't want you to lift weights. Dan is a highly outspoken character with a lot of great commentary in this upcoming episode, so be sure to tune in next week. Until then, bye!
Take my foot off the pedal for one more line. Ain't no way I'm going back. I'm a low freight train and I'm right on track.